I'd like to call the meeting to order. The Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners. I'd like to invite everyone to stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to start with a moment of silence, please. We'll do roll call. Start with Commissioner Stevens. Here. Commissioner Smith is present. Commissioner Culbertson.
Here.
Commissioner Cause.
Here.
And Commissioner Shimke.
Here.
All commissioners are present in some form. Do we have any administrative business at this time?
Commissioners, I do have the County Health Officer here. I'd like for them to come up and just kind of give you a brief update.
Morning, Jamie.
Morning, Commissioners. As you're aware, yesterday, Kansas Governor Laura Kelly vetoed House Bill 2054 that was passed through Kansas legislation. In that, her executive orders have been revoked. She revoked those orders, putting her Ad Astra plan as guidance to the county health officers in the counties to impose their own health orders. Last night, I had to amend a health order to get us to today so we can have conversation, allow additional time to review and analyze where I believe Leavenworth County needs to go in regards to putting out our own health orders as we move forward. I've looked at our surrounding counties. I've looked at and analyzed our numbers in kind of putting together what we would need to put together. In Leavenworth County at this time, I don't believe needs to impose additional limits and orders based on our current conditions. However, I strongly recommend that Leavenworth County residents and businesses continue to adhere to phases and guidance that is being put out. That has proven over the last 2 months that we have slowed down infection rates. That is, I believe, a strong provider for why our numbers have been where they have been. Currently, Leavenworth County has 188 community cases. Of that, 67 are still active cases being monitored by the health department. We also have the Grossman Center that has 67 cases, and again, there's 25 active cases, and we believe that those cases will be recovered potentially by the end of the week into early next week. So again, with our numbers outside of the LCF inmate cases, our caseload is significantly lower even than Johnson County's. Johnson County's caseload is 755, and they are also not imposing any additional limits or orders in their community. They're moving forward with what I consider the common sense rule, following the guidance, putting this back on businesses, putting it back on residents, communities to do the right thing. The last 2 months has allowed us to educate, prepare our businesses, prepare our community for this virus. And as we move forward, this will give us time to monitor the data and see if impact loosening restrictions, reopening businesses and gatherings, what that looks like. Do we start seeing an increase? But looking at Leavenworth County as a whole, since we've started introducing the phases to the plan, this has been a compliance issue all along. Those that want to comply with what guidance and rules have been out. Majority of the rules were not enforced by law enforcement or fines or jail time and things of that nature. So again, we're asking the community to continue practicing physical distancing, wear masks when you can't maintain social distancing, practice good hygiene, make decisions to protect the health of the community is what we're really truly asking. And we would provide a document and guidance with the best practices as things change. We would keep that up to date and monitor that. We would push that out. But we would not have a physical health order limiting mass gathering sizes or things of that nature specific. It's asking the community to really do the right thing for the community and really putting it onto our residents and businesses. We'll continue at the health department to investigate outbreaks, cases. We're going to continue tracing, testing, all the things that we need to continue to do at the health department to respond to the coronavirus. We appreciate how Leavenworth County has stepped up throughout the last 2 months to help mitigate the virus. The businesses especially that have had to suffer, but also very much so try to comply with all of the recommendations that the health department, CDC, and guidelines have been putting out and will continue to put out. So with that, if the recommendations are followed, we hope that our efforts will continue to recover our community. That's really where we're after and where we're at. I'm here to entertain any questions or concerns that the board has.
Any questions of Mr. Miller?
I have a question. Number on the website on the hospitalizations, I think it's been at 29 for a while. Is that, can you kind of talk about the hospitalizations and what the trend is on that, and if they go out of county, are they considered on that, or just talk about hospitalizations?
Hospitalizations are being tracked for our caseload. So in retrospect to our cases, whether they are admitted into a hospital anywhere within Kansas City, we still count that as a hospitalization as long as the individual is our case that we're following. We were at 29 for a long time. We have gone up to 31. There have been 2 additional hospitalizations. One has gone into the hospital and has already been discharged from the hospital. So the biggest thing on that is hospitalizations are only for our caseload that we are following. That also goes hand in hand with the deaths as well, as I stated the last time I was here. Deaths of individuals that were associated with the LCF. Those were individuals that lived in other counties, so those were not deaths that we actually count within our numbers and report on our numbers, even though they were affiliated to LCF. That was not a number that was part of our community case, so I do not report that death case.
And as LCF, are they consulting with you on a regular basis as far as how are they working together with the health department?
The staff has been tested. We have been the testing point for a large number of their staff that have come through our drive-through clinics. We have coordinated through KDHE's representative out at LCF. So a lot of the staff would come through ours, which expedited us the ability to know who's coming through, who's positive, and be able to contact trace their families, test their families, things of that nature in those cases. The inmates themselves have been tested with inside the walls and through KDHE. So a lot of the inmate side of the caseload, that is just strictly numbers coming to us of how many are positive inside the facility, not necessarily us. We have not tested any inmates.
Okay. And I do want to I have no more questions, but I do want to just express personally the appreciation to you and your department for everything you've done.
Especially yesterday when they got that thrown on
A
them
little surprise.
as of midnight tonight. Any other questions of Mr. Miller? Then
Do we have is there a time limit on what you're proposing, or are we just playing it day by day?
Say that again.
Do you think there's a time limit on what you're proposing, or are we just going to play this day by day? Is there,
as of right now, we will look at that, on it's an ongoing basis. We're going to be looking at those numbers. I look at those numbers daily. So if we start seeing trends in things, then I will be back in front of the board and we'll have those conversations as to what those numbers look like and what we're, and I can even prepare something for Mark that can be on a weekly basis of where we're at. But again, my game plan and goal is to continue to put out our daily reports Monday through Friday as of right now, especially as we're moving forward, so we can see what our trends look like, see what that happened. If we continue down the pathway and it looks like we're being solvent with our numbers and everything is pretty much going in the direction we want it to, then we might back that off to Monday, Wednesday, Friday on putting numbers out, so on and so forth. Because again, I'm monitored on a daily basis. If we need to put it out, we can put it out. But if it's something that is going to change, we're going to know pretty quick that all of a sudden we're starting to see a spike in numbers. We're seeing a spike in something. We have a hot spot. That's still information, as I said before. We're still going to investigate hot spots. We're still going to investigate outbreaks. We're going to do testing. We're going to continue those processes that the health department is doing. This is strictly talking about the orders. And realistically, those orders anyway have been a document in guidance, even from the state opening, for people to comply with. And it's really been a compliance issue all along. So that's what we're talking about there. The work actually at the health department is not changing. Nothing there is changing. We're going to continue to combat, coronavirus probably for a long time within the health department. But the fact of us actually putting an additional order out or imposing anything further, we're going to match and mirror very similar to what Johnson County is doing.
So social distancing is not going away for any time soon.
I'm sorry. I didn't.
Social distancing will not be going away anytime soon.
It probably is not going to be. That's going to be a term that we're going to hear for a while.
Okay. And like I said, if you don't feel safe, don't go out. If in doubt, don't go out. It's a common sense thing.
And the guidance, like I said, Livermore County guidance for reopening document that I'm putting together will have a lot of that information in it, which is for businesses, organizations, and residents as kind of the encompassing best practices, if you will. These are the things that will remain and keep our community safe, keep your neighbors safe, keep your family safe. And as things change, we can update the document and continue that out, and we can address it as we move forward.
Now, specific to Leavenworth County, as far as the county itself, with the Council on Aging, are you going to be working with Mr. LOUGHRY as far as
those again? That'll be no different than any other business that's out there. How people operate business, and that shouldn't change just because we don't have an additional order in here. We should still be looking at what's the best practice to keep people safe within, and how do we operate within our businesses, and that includes county government, whether that's a restaurant, a bar, or whatever that's open. We're basically pushing that onto those entities at this time. So yes, I will be visiting with Mark as how does the county operate. It may be for a while that the county still operates at an appointment basis, and we will move those things forward as we move forward in a process. But just because we didn't put an order doesn't necessarily mean we should really. This isn't a floodgate.
Now, the Council on Aging, of course, is a high-risk population, and we probably should be slow go on that reopening.
So it's not just Council on Aging. There's several different components even within our government, but cities and other municipalities will have to be looking at their operations as well, just as I want businesses within Livermore County to be looking at their operations. Just because we're moving forward from this and pulling away doesn't mean we take down the plexiglass, does not mean the virus is not going away. The virus is still here. The virus is still active. We just now are trying to move the economy forward. We are trying to also, we've learned and take what we've learned over the last 2 months and what social distancing means. Those are terms that before then a lot of people didn't understand what that term truly meant. But we do now. And we have masks. We were able to get supplies and protective measures in place over the last 2 months to now move forward to the next phases. And quite frankly, it's a step within this, but it's not an on-off switch, and we just didn't turn it off and say, okay, we're done, we can go away now. That's not what we're talking about. We're just not imposing, and we're not going to move forward with any further health officer emergency orders right now.
Mm-hmm. And the businesses I've been in, they've all been really, good about the social distancing, and you can up the cleanings, and I felt safe, or I wouldn't have been in there.
And I believe that's what our orders allow for, is for businesses to prepare themselves for this point, for when we were able to open back up and put these practices in place to protect the residents in our community.
Okay. Anybody?
Jamie, I didn't see churches in here. What do you want churches to do now? I didn't see them on here. What's your recommendation for churches now?
Pray to end the virus.
Churches are addressed just like any other entity.
Yeah,
We have
there are
recommendations
no-
for social distancing. They're
It's
not
social
rolled out.
distancing, it's the
They're included in the same as the businesses.
everything. Obviously, we're not spelling out, but there's general guidance for everyone that's going to be in there, and then the all business is, if you don't fit within a subcategory below, then you're part of that all business. So again, we're not signaling out any group, any specific anything. It's follow social distancing, follow the rules, and protect everyone that is going to be in, whether that is a restaurant, a church, or a box store, whatever that is, that's where we're at.
How many people do you have in your office that are working on this tracing?
At least on a daily basis, probably 7. And then we also, additional if we have others that need to make phone calls and such.
Are those part-time or full-time?
We have a lot of what the health department on a majority of the programs have had to cease, and we've moved over to COVID-19 response. So WIC services are being done on a virtual basis, phone calls, things of that nature. We still have M&I clients coming in, some very limited family planning clients that are coming in, but like immunizations, and a lot of those have had to slow down and or cease for the time being because our response and repurposing of personnel to contact tracing and phone calls and making the 50 to 75 phone calls that come into the hotline on a daily basis, just forms trying to make appointments for testing. So we've had to repurpose a lot of the staff out there. And again, the health department is a 17-person department. It's not a large department of 50 to 100 people. These are individuals that have been working Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, things of that nature throughout this entire process. So it's been quite the endeavor for the health department to undertake this, and again, that's why a lot of these orders and a lot of these recommendations have been put into place, because we're seeing that on the backside of truly who we're talking to and having to call those individuals that have been in hospitals or in quarantine, and letters and you name it. There's just a lot of pieces and components to this process.
So if you see the health department's number show up on your phone, that's a call you don't want. But do we need to adopt this? Do we need a motion to?
Just for a second, this is Commissioner Cos. I'd like for Jamie to do me a favor and do a little bit of clarification. I've had a lot of questions, and from one city elected official regarding the work release program from Lansing Correctional Facility. Can you reassure people that the inmates that are on the work release are not a huge risk any longer, or not infected, and just kind of go over that process? Thanks.
Sure. We were notified from actually a business within Leavenworth County that had those same concerns because they have inmates that work for their business and work release plan. So I did reach out to LCF and KDHE in regards to what their process was. Over 740 of the inmates within LCF out of the 815 cases have recovered. They've gone through the process. This has been a long process for the LCF in their inmates, in testing, in multiple testings and such. Those that have qualified to come back out onto work release have been medically cleared, and the risk is no different than any of the rest of the community to go to work, just as we are sitting here today. So I know there's obviously large concern because there's numbers there, but again, these inmates that have been released to come back to work is very similar to the processes as we are through the Grossman Center of releasing and recovery, and the same for the 118 community cases that we've released from the health department to go back to work as such. So they are medically cleared to go back to work.
Any other questions of Mr. Miller? Okay. So do we need a motion to accept the health director's guidance for reopening?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, this is David Van Paris. The health officer has the authority to issue this order. I think it's in the interest of the public that this board, with a full understanding of his order, express their support for the same.
So do you need a motion to support this?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to support the county health director's document for guidance for reopening.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cos votes aye.
Commissioner Shimke votes aye.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, Jamie, for all you've done, and your staff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you, Amy.
All right. We'll move on to or do we have any more administrative business, Mr. Loughery?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anything need to be removed for the consent agenda and considered separately? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cos votes yes.
Commissioner Shimke votes yes.
All right. Thank you. All right. So we're ready for planning and zoning. Crystal, how are you today?
Hello, Commissioner. How are you?
I'm fine.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This is a request to approve Resolution 2020-19. This is an amendment to the Leavenworth County Planning and Zoning Fee Schedule. As you know, we have talked quite a bit about amending this over the last several months. This amendment includes the creation of a single fee for single-family residential homes, which would be $4,620. That fee includes a septic permit and septic inspection. Currently, those are two separate permits, but under this proposal, it will all be all-encompassing. It also includes the introduction of a home replacement fee of $800. The home replacement fee is in the case of, say, there's a home on a property that has been in disrepair for quite some time, and instead of remodeling that home, the property owner chooses to demolish the home and build a new home. Mm-hmm. That does not include if the home were to be demolished by a tornado or a fire, in which case the resolution that waives all fees would apply. This is just in the case of a dilapidated home or something of that nature. This resolution also includes the removal of road improvement fee and traffic impact fee, and it includes an increase of $150 for commercial building permits across the board, and that is so that we can also incorporate their septic permit into that fee also. Commercial buildings do require engineered septic systems, so we don't do any inspection of those, but then we do still issue the permit and process the permit. Those are the proposed changes. Obviously, staff recommends approval of this, and I'll answer any questions you may
Well,
have.
how are we going to deal with the plats that were applied for and approved under the old system where they put the road in and all them fees were waived, the RIF and TIF were waived. Our road improvement fee was waived.
Commissioners, I think we discussed this in the work session, actually, that there might be some carryover or crossover on this, and we will address those as they come in. There aren't that many out there. I don't remember the count. We had a count at one time, but that was a month or so ago. There aren't that many out there, but
Is
we're
there
aware of
3
them.
out there?
I don't remember it off the top of my head, so I wouldn't want to hazard a guess right now, but we will monitor that, and we're not going to duplicate where we can avoid it.
Okay. Because I'm sure that's a concern with, people that's planned these developments and have paid to put the road in or are in the process of doing that right now. So, okay.
Yeah, Doug, this is Commissioner Shimke. Yeah, along those same lines, this all makes sense to me, but I did have 2 questions, and one of them was what you just mentioned when we do have a developer or development group that is doing something in scale or scope much larger than just a single family home when you're talking about these interior roads and making sure that we're being developer friendly to get these homes built. I think it's in our best interest to be. And then secondarily was the commercial building permits, and I didn't realize, I guess, that those commercial building permits were so low. I mean, if you look in comparison to a single family home, there's obviously a fairly wide gap. Now I realize that there could be additional benefits going to or surrounding a new commercial building, say in the city limits, where they have certain abatement programs and this, that, and the other. But if you're talking about a commercial building of any real size, there's a substantial value difference between it and your standard single family home, and why there's such a disparity between them. Those are my 2 questions.
So, Commissioner Shimke, the second item about the disparity in the permitting fee for commercial structures. Primarily, commercial structures come along with a special use permit, and as you may remember, special use permits, a traffic impact fee, which is separate from the old traffic impact fee that came along with building permits, is assessed, and that's based upon the actual traffic that's being generated by that business. So while it's not reflected in the permit fee, they do pay additional fees on top of that permit fee.
And the new fee, how does it compare to the old fee, the old building permit with everything added onto it?
It's the same.
Actually, it's
70 cents less.
It's less, like $3,000 from 3 years ago?
Yeah, correct.
3 years ago, yeah, it's way less.
Yeah.
When did I come on? Oh, 3 years ago.
Yeah. I have one thing, and maybe it addresses what you brought up, Doug, but this is from a developer, and I'm going to read it to you, and then you can address it, and then you remark. We have a concern about a policy change in the middle of our development. We're installing an interior road through our property, which has no RIF, DIF, or TIF fees due. If you change the current policy without exceptions, we will now have to pay the new fees when purchasing building permits. It is our understanding that additional costs will be added to the building permits to offset RIF, TIF, and DIFs that are currently charged. We have already priced and sold lots based upon the current building permit fees. We think considerations need to be made for those that have developments in process. So could you respond to that?
So I'm not sure which development that is. Obviously, it's the first I've heard this. But I would say that definitely falls under what we just spoke about what Mr. LOUGHRY mentioned, that those that have already been approved previously without any fees because of the building of an interior road, those would be treated differently than going forward.
Is that something the board will have to take action on, or is that something that can be handled internally in your office? Or how do you anticipate that being handled?
That can be handled in your motion.
Well, I think it's already addressed probably, but you can certainly include that in your motion if you like. Again, there aren't that many of them. There's a pretty limited number of lots this even impacts. Those that were already approved that way they're already in place. So I mean that's taken care of. Any new ones, obviously, that's going to be a concern they'll have to worry about, but that's what the policy is. So some of the there's always going to be a crossover. Whenever we change a policy, there's just that window where how this works or how that works. We're not trying to be overly burdensome on anybody and wouldn't expect anybody to pay duplicate permit fees. But the lots that are out there that were already approved and already have this should be treated the way they were already told they were going to be.
Because there could be some of them out there that's been out there 10, 15 years that haven't sold that had an interior road put in.
Again, I think we analyzed that when we were talking about this originally, and there really aren't as many lots as people may think.
Okay. Any other questions of Crystal?
Joe, does that answer your question that you had?
Go. Come forward. As long as you got your personal protective equipment.
Joe Herrick, Harris Bank, 3151 bid. Appreciate the opportunity. Two things were stated there. Mark said that as long as it's approved lots that are existing, one of those plats are yet to go before the board. I think we're adding 40 lots total between the three projects that are building roads currently or will be building roads that will be affected by this, not to include the ones that have been approved in the past. But Commissioner Shimke also stated to be developer friendly. So is this for future developers that want to put in an interior road? Are they going to get treated the same, or do they have to pay the one-time building permit fee, build the road, and incur the RIF portion that's not called the RIF anymore?
Yes.
So that goes against what I believe what Commissioner Shimke was saying, that he wants to maintain a developer-friendly situation for our county. And it kind of goes against why would you want to spend that money on the road if you're not getting consideration for putting that money into Leavenworth County.
You think that improved roads increases the value of the lots to offset that cost, Joe, in most cases?
Improved roads that they build, yes. That the developer builds. Absolutely.
Right. So they regain that cost by the sale of the lots, and the lots are more valuable because of the improvement.
Discuss that. Still
Yeah.
what the value is creating that cost is the person putting that money out there that's creating the additional value to that lot, and that's why they're doing it. Otherwise, they wouldn't. So that's my concern. I think that it would be developers' concerns as well, that they would want to have that consideration. If they're going to invest that money into our community, put in 2.5 acre lots, which this board has expressed they wanted, they should be considered.
This is Commissioner Shimke. Yeah, what I was going to add or hope to include in any motion is that while I don't have a problem with these proposed, this newly proposed fee schedule, I think we do need to have some type of policy in place. When I mentioned a development of any scale or scope, that to me looks and feels very different. It's been this board's position on the last handful of developments, a couple, 2, 3 that I think Mr. Herring is referencing, that there should be some reduction in expenses with the county when you are building and improving the infrastructure that didn't exist. Now, Mark, I'm not trying to argue against the fact that it should make and will make those lots of higher value. But I think the policy was still a good one in that there is going to be a fee associated with building, multiple residences. But as a developer who is building multiple residences and again, improving, or not in this case, generally they may not even be improving. They're creating, a roadway that didn't exist before, that those associated fees, be waived, and or there's some amount of a, discount to the volume of building 10, 20, 40 homes on a particular builder. At least that's in my opinion. I don't know what everybody else's feeling is, but I think based on how we voted on some of these in the past, that there's been agreement in that.
I think that they're also creating the need for those roads when they're, Commissioner, when they're making these developments, they're creating the need or the requirement for the improvements to those roads because of the new homes. It's not that they're building the new roads out of the kindness of their heart. They're building new roads because they need to have them in order to have 40 new lots. But that was the transition from the RIF and TIF over to the building permit fee, is because we have these conversations back and forth, and when we allow this interpretation here and this interpretation there, we get into I want to apply for an exception to a rule. That's why we changed the rule to say it's just a flat fee, it's $4,600, and there you go. That way there's no interpretation, they know right up front. But we did have all those policies in place before that allowed the exceptions, that allowed you to offset your fees. So I think we're starting to make changes to a policy that we haven't even adopted yet.
And Mark, this Commissioner Shimke, I realize that's a slippery slope, and then you get into, again, what was it, the existing roadway versus no roadway, the amount of investment, everything else. I would, rather than trying to get into the, RIF and TIF debate, which we've obviously, we've all gone in many circles about, I'd rather see, some type of a discount, or a number created. I don't know if that's $2,500 per instance, or $3,000 per instance, or $3,500 per instance, some amount of savings when you have somebody that is going to build and help our community grow. I realize that they're putting in that road. It does come at a cost to them, and hopefully those lots will be that much easier to sell, and hopefully at a higher price point. But again, generally speaking, when you're talking about a single residence, it's on an existing roadway versus what we're talking about, which is a new development that doesn't exist. And again, being more developer friendly. So rather than get into the RIF and TIF and why and who and how, I'm almost thinking about it more like a volume discount. If I'm going to build 10 homes, do I really need to spend the $46,000, or should there be some amount of savings because I'm the one that's creating, a couple $1 million worth of valuation?
Question for Mr. Herring. Are you suggesting that that we should go back to the drawing board on the policy and write an exception for if there's a high volume number of houses constructed, that should be added to the policy? Or what is your proposal for this?
Well, I think that the policy should be clearly defined. If there is going to be a discount to developers putting in interior roads for the volume of houses, that should be included in this policy instead of trying to have to fix it later. And also a process should be defined prior to approval that states if your subdivision was built prior to, you should be exempt to, or you should be allowed to lower fee. How that handled instead of when you take it on a case-by-case basis. Does it go through planning and zoning? Does it go through public works? Does it go through Mark Walker?
Well, it shouldn't go through Joe Herring either to make that decision.
I did suggest that in no way, shape, or form there, Mark. I'm just here representing my clients and respecting your decision, and I hope you will respect mine as well in my statement.
Well, on the existing lots, it's easy enough to, when they were platted and when it was done, that should be no problem. The ones that are being built right now, who have already had their plats approved or even started the platting process and are started for the interior roads, they should be exempt from the new policy, the way I see it. I don't know how the rest of the board sees it. And then going forward, they can be part of somebody's motion if they want to discount for interior roads.
I just guess, it's kind of, because we had done a work session on this, but I'm wondering, what you're specifically asking for is, how many houses are we talking where the discount would come into play, and how the logistics of that would all work, that I'm not quite sure that we're going
If
to
there's
have an
any-
exact,
Well, if there's any discount, it should be if it's an interior road, if somebody pays for an interior road.
but like, is it a certain number of houses that
If you put
They kick
your-
that in,
If you're
or-
going to do a discount, it should be just for an interior road.
But, Commissioners, the interior road, again, the reason for the interior road is so that they can have the additional lots. The need for the road is because of the development, not because the need exists because there's public traffic there. It's because of the development. Additionally, it's the people who are building the homes who are paying this fee, not typically the developer. Sometimes it is the developer. There are some developers that do that, but not typically the developer paying the fees, which I think was all discussed during the work session when we started this, and why we came to this flat fee of, it is what it is. Yes, there are some people who are going to pay it that in the past wouldn't have had to, but it becomes a no more debate on who pays it and who doesn't. That's why we are where we are. As a policy, whatever this board decides they want to do is fine. I would, and I understand that somebody building 45 homes has a larger impact to the county than somebody building one home, but to me, from an applicability standpoint, you have the fee or you don't have the fee, because each one of those fees is on that house. It's not on the 45 houses, and because I plot, and Joe, I'm sure you can see this around the county, just because you plat 45 lots doesn't mean 45 houses are going to be built. There are a lot of subdivisions that have empty lots today that have been empty for years. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're going to err on the side of the developer, I think you should err on the side of every developer, not just the guys who have enough money to develop 45 lots.
Any other questions? Crystal?
And Joe, I apologize. I did not mean to attack you specifically in that. That was not my intent. Sorry.
Like I said, we've got the existing plats and interior roads covered under this, that they would not have to pay the new fee. Correct? Or that could be part of the motion to accept that. And then
Say that again.
existing plats that are currently
Approved.
in the process, or actually in the process of being done right now, because they started the platting process under the old system. If they were putting an interior road, these fees would have waived the RIF and TIF, or the
I think
RIF.
you'd want to clarify that any lot that is already exempt from the RIF and TIF fees due to development policies in place today would remain exempt. Because some of those plats they're not exempt, they would have to pay.
Right, as long as they have the interior road
If
ones.
they were exempt today, that they would remain exempt.
So when we say waiving the fee, I assume we're not talking about waiving the entire building permit.
No.
So it would be like charging a home replacement fee, or I just want to make sure we get that clear.
On the old, well, they'd be under the old building permit fee, except for they wouldn't have to pay the road improvement fee. Is that the way them plats are, when they do the interior roads, that we waive that?
We had been waiving the RIF or the TIF, I believe.
I believe the RIF had been waived.
Yeah, but the TIF would still apply, the traffic impact fee still applied, but the road improvement fee did not apply.
Correct.
So the old traffic impact fee was $820.70.
The RIF fee, though, was,
The RIF fee was $3,000.
right,
So you just knocked 3,000 off of.
yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So it would now be, this Commissioner Shimke, would now be 1,600?
For the ones that are already approved.
Okay.
And to me, it should be all the ones that are in the process right now that are putting roads in. How many of them do we have?
Well, I think they would have already been approved then if they're in the process of putting the roads in or have made application. It'd just be
Okay.
new ones coming forward.
It'd just be any new plat applied for after today?
Yeah.
Okay. The ones that are in the system now, the RIF would be waived off of this 4,600.
And we're talking when a developer has built a road to county standard.
Correct.
Not
Not a private road.
not a private road, not a dust abatement road,
Right.
a road that was built
To
to
county.
county standards.
Okay.
And then would we revisit the issue of the interior roads, the suggestion of if there's a high volume
We can
number?
have a work session on that. Mr. Herring?
Does that include the plat that still come before the board? Eagle-
That's already applied and in the process right now, yes. Anybody that started the process. Any other questions of Crystal?
So,
Then I'll entertain a motion.
so I'll move that we approve resolution 2020-19, amending the planning and zoning fee schedule for 2020 with the exception that any lot already exempt from RIF or plats in process will be exempt.
Can I clarify that? Can we approve this, and then next week we bring back the language that would cover what we're discussing today? Because what I'm concerned is that when you like the motion, the way it was stated there, the plats that are in process now may or may not have been waived, that RIF. They may have had to pay that RIF because they weren't building a road to standards or whatever. So if we could just,
You want to
Just
bring the
to be-
whole thing back next week with a motion?
that's fine too. I mean, that might make it cleaner,
Okay.
but I'd hate to, we're trying to amend something on the fly. I want to make sure we get it covered correctly.
Okay.
So we can just bring that with that language back next week.
So is that your motion to bring it back next week?
I'll just withdraw my motion.
And then the consensus to bring it back next week? Is that good? All right. Sounds good. All right, thank you, Crystal.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Crystal. Mark, this is Commissioner Shimke. Can we also look at when you work with Crystal and staff on these commercial buildings? So I realize the SUP determination, and while that makes some sense, there's clearly instances where, because of location or type of business, the valuation process that we might go through, that it may be negligible as far as the impact that they have. And yet you've got a several $100,000 structure, or a structure worth millions and millions of dollars being constructed for a value that comes in considerably less than a new home. I think that's something we should look at. And hey, look, if the SUP can guarantee a minimum fee, that's one thing. But I have a real problem with a person building a brand new home and spending $300,000 on it, and an instance where a commercial building could be constructed for $2.5 million, and somehow that fee end up being less.
Well, again, their RIF and TIF is calculated as part of their use permit, and right now they all require a use permit. So that's why it's been handled separately, because the residential includes the RIF and TIF, and the commercial is part of their use permit. So they actually, it's calculated based on actual traffic volume that's anticipated. So I understand what you're saying.
Right. In some instances you may have hundreds of cars a day. In some instances you may only have the 5 or 10 people that work there. If I can be assured that in an instance where there's only 5 or 10 people or less that occupy, a commercial structure, that it would exceed the $4,600 we're charging single-family home, then I'm good with it. But I guess I don't know enough. I realize there's not a ton of commercial buildings being built, unfortunately. But it seems like there could be instances where someone could construct something much larger than a single-family home and actually pay less based on what the use case is.
Understood.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, thank you.
Chris, I have one question for you, sorry. This is on a separate issue. If I have a business, say I have a winery, and when does the requirement for special use permit kick in? If I just have a winery and it's my personal business, can you just talk about that, when the requirement would come into play?
Sure. So, Mr. Van Peers, correct me if I'm wrong here, but essentially, if you are growing your own grapes, your own tomatoes, your own cantaloupe, whatever it is that you choose to make wine out of, and you are processing, you're fermenting that, and you're turning it into wine on your property, and you're selling that, and that's all you're doing, you don't need a special use permit. It is considered agriculture in the state of Kansas. If you want to bring in outside merchandise, and you want to have a retail shop, and maybe you want to sell bottle openers and really cute mugs and shirts and that sort of thing. Now we're not an agricultural use. We still have the agricultural use, but this additional retail is what brings us over into needing a special use permit.
What if I have a winery and I invite, like, I have parties at my house and large groups? Is that in a gray area, or is that becoming a business?
Are you charging?
So as soon as you start advertising that and promoting it as a commercial event, I think it becomes a commercial event. If you want to have a murder mystery and you advertise that as a commercial event, then, I mean, we had a rodeo issue where it was all family.
Right.
But when they tried to do a rodeo and they promoted it commercially, then it becomes commercial.
Yeah.
So I think it, and Mr. Van Paris, maybe you can weigh in on that, but there's a point where it crosses over.
Commissioner Stieben, there's no cookie-cutter answer to this. It's dependent upon the facts and circumstances of each case. I don't want to speculate as to what may or may not apply. Agritourism is encouraged by state policy. This board has been supportive of it as well. But when things cross into commercial uses, then the appropriate zoning regulations should apply.
That's all I had.
Okay. All right, thank you. Ready for Mr. Knoll?
All right.
How are you today?
Good, how are you?
Good.
All right, our first item today is the acceptance of a bid for the 178th Street Geometric Improvement Project. We did have 8 bidders on the project. We have the 2 low bidders, the low bidder being Amino Brothers Incorporated of Kansas City, Kansas. They are a Wyandotte County business. The bid price is $665,998.95, and the low local bid is Lina Weaver Construction of Lansing, obviously a Leavenworth County business, of $675,575.75. Bids were accepted via GoToMeeting. Was very competitive and did have a fairly good, tight range of pricing.
Did we ever close out 179th and 182nd Street?
You're talking about the 2 dust abatement projects that we had previously. Those projects ended up being completed by staff. I think, as you recall, the contractor on those 2 projects, we never accepted the projects from them. We ended up not paying out the balance of the contract, and staff had to go out and finish those 2 projects.
And what was the cost difference between staff finishing and what the contract, what we withheld?
I think, Mr. Knoll, you have that information.
Yes, I have some of that information here. So, on those projects, the labor, equipment, and material for 182nd Street, the cost for the county completing the project was $85,938, and for 179th Street, the cost was $81,492. The initial agreement for those projects, what I understand the total contract amount was for 182nd Street, $428,486, and for 179th Street was $316,569. Respectively, one had looks like a withholding of $16,102, and the other one had one of $18,161 for those projects. I do believe I'm not familiar with it, and maybe Mr. Van Paris is there since the time I've started, and I have not concluded to take that off of a weekly report. There was a pre-existing lien release on those projects that I am not 100% familiar with, or actually familiar with at all. And
Okay.
so I don't know if technically they have been closed out according to the bonds, or some of whatever that lien release requirement may have been.
So we had over $100,000 out of the Road and Bridge Fund to finish these projects.
That is correct.
Okay. And you did not go against the bond or anything, or?
Commissioner, I'd have to check the exact file on this. I think the contemplation was that the county just wanted to finish the project, particularly 179th Street, due to the fact that that had been ongoing for several years, and there were some issues with respect to the contract that was entered into by the county, specifically inspection issues.
Or lack of inspections?
I can't disagree with that statement, Commissioner.
Okay. Okay. Anybody
And Bill,
else?
this is Commissioner Shimke. If memory serves, on those couple of projects, so the inspections or lack thereof, as Doug mentioned, were obviously a big issue. Wasn't another one maybe when I say weather related? Time of year and installation, is that a concern in any of this, or do you believe it might have been?
Well, obviously, I wasn't here at the time of the project. There are two main preparatory issues that would need to be looked at and should have been looked at by staff at the time. Would have been base preparation and time of application. Generally, you want to give yourself a cure time on chip and seal prior to the first frost. And I believe this project was put in fairly late in the season, so I don't know the specific date of the first frost of that year. So, but that is something that is generally well thought of in chip and sealing, and then also base preparation for the projects in order to see that it had good compaction, which would have been an inspection item, in order to make sure that water did not get down in that base immediately. And it did seal the road surface with the chip and seal in order to make it not blow out. So those are the two primary items that would have been looked at. Would have been time of application prior to first frost and base application.
No, thank you. That was my next question, was the stabilization piece. It just seemed like there were lots of variables, so.
Commissioner Shimpe, you're correct about, we did have a harsh winter that year, but some of the deficiencies were identified prior to the winter. And if they would have been repaired prior to the winter, it may not have been as bad.
And Commissioner, I think you're exactly right, and that's why the board took the action rather than calling the bond. We understood that there were some issues there, but the project immediately upon completion had some issues, and we were trying to get those addressed, but because it was late in the year, they were not able to address them before winter set in. We did have a harsh winter. The roads fell apart, meaning that to go back and fix what the original problems, which were rutting and washboarding, there were additional problems on top of that, which would have basically required the contractor to completely rebuild the roads. And they felt like, from a financial standpoint, it made more sense to come to an agreement with this county where we fixed the roads and they walked away.
Well, and this is Commissioner Shimke again. It seemed like there were a number of issues beyond just those projects. I mean, I can distinctly remember issues with Gilman, issues with 127th. I believe that was work that we did internally versus subcontracted out, very similar road surface type. But, a lot of this to me goes back to not just the type of application. I mentioned when the application ultimately occurs, but long term, chip and seal doesn't seem to be the preferred method as far as new road surface type versus managing, maintaining, going forward. So just to be clear, specific to this project, the geometric improvement, like exactly what road surface application is this?
This will be an asphalt roadway once it's completed.
Okay, that's what I thought. So a completely different application than everything that we're talking about?
Yes, that was a double chip and seal application, and this would be an asphalt application.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Knoll?
This is Commissioner Cos. Was the double chip, so the double chip and seal was not completed by the contractor prior to the winter season?
I didn't hear your question, Commissioner Cos.
Okay, so am I to assume that only one application had been applied on those two roads and not the second application of chip and seal?
No, there was two chip seals on that.
And the road failed prior to the freeze cycle?
We had some emails in October, November.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say they failed, they just didn't have a surface that we were willing to accept. They had some washboarding and rutting almost at the same time of completion. It was within a few weeks, but I wouldn't say they were failed. They just weren't an acceptable driving surface.
So at that time, had the winter not come, what would have been the fix for the rutting and the issues that were present at that time?
I don't know that. That's outside of my scope. But
I would have, without having been here, just to make a blanket assumption, you would have probably ground out those locations and then reapplied double chip and seal to them. Would be the typical process to correct a location that has some sort of failure issue.
But okay, so with the base, so that would indicate there were no issues with the base to begin with?
Well, a washboarding of chip and seal would indicate that there would have been some sort of slippage of the base underneath it that would have allowed for that to occur. And so that goes back to compaction, which would have been an inspection item, which is my assumption what Mr. Van Paris was referring to. Obviously, these are assumptions since I was not here at the time.
Any other questions of Mr. Knoll? Then I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to take advantage of our policy of allowing us to select a local business if they come in under 5% of the difference of the lowest bid, and I'd like to make a motion to select Line Weaver Construction for 178th Street Geometric Information or Improvement Project for $695,575.70.
Second. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the awarding the contract? Then voting.
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cos, Shimke?
Commissioner Cos votes no.
Commissioner Shimke votes aye.
I voted, just want to get this project done. Let's get it off the ground. We'll see how this one goes. All right, next one.
We do have a blank contract prepared for that, so it
Okay.
would require everyone's signature here.
All right, we'll get that before we all leave today.
The next board item that I have today is to approve the moving forward of the federal funds for state funds to be used in conjunction with the special highway fund. Specifically, I'm very familiar with the federal fund exchange, and you can submit all types of different reimbursable costs to them in order to get your finances received. If you don't design a project to federal standards, the application is that you receive 90 cents of every dollar of federal funds.
that 10% reduction is much less than actually designing a project to federal standards. And so the county would receive $283,171.64. These monies would be earmarked and deposited into the new special highway fund at the time of its creation, and then would be incorporated into the capital improvement plan. The motion that would be necessary for this would be to authorize me to accept that 90 cents of every $1 of federal funds.
Anyone have any questions of Mr. Knoll about the federal funds, or exchanging federal funds for state funds? Pretty standard.
This is Commissioner Shimke. I think anytime you want to go get state or federal money, Bill, you should. Thank you.
Yep. Yes. Anytime it's available.
So I'll entertain a motion.
This is
Go ahead, Commissioner Cos.
I just have one question on the exchange. Does that change any of the wage requirements
Yes, it does.
if we're accepting federal funds?
Yes, I believe it does. The Davis-Bacon Act, if you were going to be designing a project to federal standards and administrating the project through federal highway, then I would believe the Davis-Bacon Act would be required. If you take the 90 cents of every dollar of federal funds, then you're locally administering those projects, and that does not generally occur. Specifically, graveling is considered a project, and so is chip and sealing. And so the county is constantly completing in-kind service projects that can be submitted for. And so specifically, you don't have to design a project. You don't even have to have any real ongoing projects that aren't maintenance related. You can have maintenance related projects that you can submit for, and then use these funds as matching funds for other federal funds, or you can use these funds for other projects that you currently have in your capital improvement plan.
Any other questions of Mr. Knoll? Then I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve exchanging federal funds for state funds to be used for E58 bridge construction reimbursement.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Then voting.
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cos votes aye.
Commissioner Shimke votes aye.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot, Bill. Okay. Is there anything else before we go to an executive session? Does anybody want to report on anything been going on? I got. Go ahead, Commissioner Cos.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Cos. I just wanted to report that I participated in the workforce development meeting yesterday, and they will begin by appointment being clients of the unemployment office and workforce issues in Leavenworth County in all locations beginning the 1st of June.
Okay. Let's see, I believe Bayshore has their public hearing tonight on their industrial revenue bonds for the project. I attended the BFW ceremony at the Glenwood Cemetery on Monday. And I got a thank you card from American Legion Post 23 for the donation, and then also St. Vincent's Clinic for their donation. And we have a letter from the Leavenworth County Historical Society. The Carroll Mansion Museum has what they consider a need for a roof on our delay on the August. And did all of you get this? Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get it, Commissioner Cos?
Yes, I did.
Okay, all right. So is this something we need to just put on the agenda for next week? Look at that.
I didn't read the letter, but are they saying that they need to
$18,000, I believe.
move quickly?
Yes, it's
Okay.
time sensitive, it's on a roof.
I mean, I think we could take care of it even today if you wanted to.
Do we need it on the agenda?
It should be on the agenda if you're going to take action on it, especially since we earlier voted to table all
Right.
those items till later. And by allocating $18,000 to that project, you are going to be reducing the amount you'll have to allocate to any future requests that were, or the requests that were made already.
All right. Did you receive that letter?
That had the pictures?
Yes.
Yes, I did
Okay.
receive that. Most of those are an ongoing request. I think they've been asking for funding for that
Yeah.
for at least 3 years.
Okay.
And as you can see in the pictures, those aren't issues that came up this week. Those are hundreds
Right.
of years of deferred maintenance, would be my guess.
But we can discuss it.
So,
We can discuss it.
we can put that on the agenda.
Put that on the agenda to discuss. Okay. Commissioners have anything else?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Cos. I'll also report that tomorrow I will be participating in a Zoom meeting for a grant that will be submitted by the United Way. Well, actually, the United Way is the administering agency for the CARES funding, a grant for the emergency sheltering funds.
Okay. And
It will
then,
be submitted next week.
and who will be attending the Port Authority meeting today at 11:30?
Well, I know normally Commissioner Shimke does, and I am available if need be, unless another commissioner would like to attend this time.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Shimke. I was planning to attend.
Okay. Anyone else? I need to be, I can't make it. Could you take care of that, Commissioner Cos?
Sure.
All right, thank you. All right, then if there's nothing else that anybody needs to bring before the board, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I move that this board recess for a closed executive session meeting for the discussion of a subject involving the legal interests of the county as justified by KSA 75-4319B2 for consultation with legal counsel for the board, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship, and that board resume open meeting at, how long do we need? 15 minutes?
Commissioner Culbertson, I'd ask for 30 minutes.
Okay?
Resume open meeting at 10:45 in the meeting room of the board. Present in the executive meeting will be Commissioners Culbertson, Cos, Shimke, Smith, STIEBEN, Senior County Councilor Dave Van Paris, and County Administrator Mark LOUGHRY.
Second. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting.
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cos votes aye.
Commissioner Shimke votes aye.
All right, thank you.
Is that?
We're returning to regular session from executive session. The topics, discussion was limited to legal interest of the county. No decisions were made. All right, we're back in. All right. We're in regular session. Is there anything before we adjourn?
I had a question
right.
on, and this, maybe Mark can address this, the
0417.
the CARES Act that came from the federal government allotted $1.25 billion to the state of Kansas. My understanding is 2 of the largest counties had their money directly allotted, and then the rest of the counties in Kansas, the money was funneled to the state. The question is the portion that should be given to Leavenworth County, and I want Mark to address that issue. And I noted that when prior to the legislature's action, the governor had appointed a commission or committee, and Leavenworth County did not have one person appointed to that committee representing how that money would be distributed. And then the piece of legislation that passed through the legislature also did not specifically allot any money to Leavenworth County. So Can you address those issues, Mark, and what the actions we should take in order for Leavenworth County to get our fair allotment of monies to help us offset some of this events of the crisis?
You talking about the full $15 million?
Yeah, and maybe you can address the numbers.
So, Commissioners, as you're aware, the federal government passed the CARES Act, which was trillions of dollars. A portion of that included direct funding for COVID-related expenditures to state and local government. Each state was to receive at least $1.25 billion based on population. Kansas, because of our population, we did receive $1.25 billion for the state of Kansas. The larger counties were allowed to apply directly for that funding. The Johnson County and Sedgwick County, they each received their funding directly from the federal government. The balance is passed to the state to then be allocated out to the local municipalities, in our opinion, based on population and the same calculation that the federal government used. This Leavenworth County should receive approximately $15,785,000, which would then be distributed out to the municipalities within the county based on a similar calculation. And again, in my opinion, and we have a breakdown on how that would be. It was clear that the governor's committee was going to make those decisions. Then the legislators adopted a bill that excluded cities almost and municipalities in general entirely, and only anticipated providing funds to state agencies. So I think it's really important for the county to take action to protect our interests in the CARES Act funding.
Mark, do you mind reading off the numbers for the cities?
Just again, approximation. I believe that the city of Leavenworth would have received about $6,900,000. City of Lansing would have received $2,300,000. Baser $1,250,000, and Tonganoxie $1,077,000. And the county would then have retained $4,203,000.
That's if we received the full amount, if it was just a pass-through account.
If we would have received it as a proportion that Johnson County and Sedgwick County received, then yes, I believe those are the accurate calculations.
Okay.
So in order to expedite our interest, what would the recommendation be?
I believe you would need a motion for us to send a demand letter to the state asking for the county's proportionate share of CARES Act funding.
And this would be a precursor to possible litigation.
Commissioner Stieben, members of the commission, a demand letter is an appropriate first step to protect the citizens of Leavenworth's interests in these funds, which were, I believe, intended to come down to the local level. It's a question of actually making it occur. You do have legal remedies through potential litigation if necessary.
Okay.
And can we reach out to adjacent counties and see if they would go in on this letter with us and include in the letter some verbiage about an injunction that might tie up the state funds that we send to the state voluntarily? Wouldn't an injunction block that?
I think that getting the letter out immediately is important because the legislators are going to come back into session. So waiting for other counties to decide may not be the best. I think we could send the letter and then ask them to join in.
Yeah, I didn't mean wait for them to send our letter. I meant just reach out to them and let them know what we're doing and see if they want to do it also or with us.
And this is something we could potentially move ahead on at our next meeting.
I think you could give us a motion today to direct the demand letter.
Okay. But as far as making our decision, we could move potentially at our next meeting.
Commissioner Stieben, your next meeting will fortuitously be the same day that the Kansas legislature has been recalled to session. So dependent upon their actions, I think you'd be able to review it on June 10th.
Okay.
I'd like to get the letter out to them before that.
That was Commissioner Cos.
Was that a motion?
That was Commissioner Cos. Yeah, Commissioner Cos has motion to direct staff to prepare and send a letter of demand to the state of Kansas regarding the CARES Act funding allocation for Leavenworth County.
Second.
Does your letter have a deadline that we need to hear back by?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, you could set a deadline date, but as I alluded to earlier, the state legislature will reconvene on June 3rd, and we do not know what remedy they may offer you. I would suggest you send a demand stating that you will be evaluating the situation, that you believe it's incumbent upon you to protect the interests of Leavenworth County citizens, and that absent any assurance, you will take appropriate action.
Okay.
That would be in my motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on sending the demand letter?
I just think the way this has been handled by the state has been highly inappropriate. From the governor, including the legislature, for our county, we are kind of left out in the cold. And I think we need to make it very clear that if you excluding Johnson and Sedgwick County, we're the 4th largest county in the state.
Mm-hmm.
So we should be respected. We certainly should have been included on the governor's commission with a representative, but I think we just need to make sure that our interests, as far as the citizens, the 80-some thousand citizens of our county, are represented.
Well, so are cities.
Yeah.
This is
everybody.
If it flows to the county, it will get to the cities. So we wouldn't think of holding it up. So, anyways, all right. No further discussion. Voting.
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cos, aye.
Commissioner Shimke votes aye.
All right. Any other business for the board before we adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I think it'd be appropriate to acknowledge the passing of Shirley Pendergraft. She was a deputy for 27 years for Leavenworth County, did tremendous service to the community during that time, was honored by the local bar association with its Liberty Bell Award for her services. Today is her funeral, so I think you should acknowledge that.
I'm sorry I didn't do that during our moment of silence. I'd read that in the paper. Thank you for reminding us. Yes, Shirley Pendergraft was around the county as long as I can remember. So
I think we have a question about the activities and the meetings that have taken place between Commissioner Cos and Commissioner Shimke related to the Fire District Board. Is there
Yeah, this is Commissioner Shimke, so I was going to bring that up before we adjourned. Obviously, there's been continued discussions and meetings with the Fire District Board, the townships, and of course the City of Lansing. At this point in time, it seems clear that no amicable resolution will be met before the current interlocal agreement is set to expire. I think most everybody is aware that we've, since a lot of these discussions have started, the fire chief has resigned. A number of other staff, have resigned. The concern should be imminent, I think, for all parties involved that public safety is, of utmost importance and priority. And with not having a clear direction or path forward between the townships and the City of Lansing, I think we're in a position where we can add stability where it's been lacking now for some period of time. I think between pending lawsuits, the current economics associated with all parties involved, there's not a lot of other options for us to explore. It's been, again, in my opinion, and would welcome any additional feedback that, the county has the ability to provide those resources, better so than any one individual stakeholder can, to help find that stability. So I'd like to maybe, ask Mr. Van Paris or Mr. LOUGHRY, any thoughts or recommendations on, how best to approach, the communication to all entities of our intention upon the expiration of the interlocal agreement next month.
Commissioner Shimke, thank you for bringing that topic up. As you pointed out, the interlocal agreement by its terms does expire on or about June 30th of this year. There does not appear to be any intent on the part of the townships in the city to attempt to extend the term of that interlocal agreement. By operation of law, you resume control and authority. And Commissioner Shimke, please correct me if I am incorrect, but letters to the city and the townships could be sent with, and my understanding of your statement is that it's basically a declaration of the intent of the board to operate the district on the basis of advice and professional services by fire protection professionals. Is that understanding correct?
Correct.
And this is Commissioner Cos. I agree with Commissioner Shimke.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, two commissioners, for staying on top of all this and going to all these meetings. So is there any recommendations at this time?
Is that like a motion, or is that?
Commissioners, if you would like, Mr. LOUGHRY and I can prepare a letter to the city of Lansing and the townships with respect to our understanding. Actually, I think it's a declared intent of this board that subsequent to June 30th, the Board of County Commissioners will be the controlling authority for Fire District Number 1, and that you fully intend to take the advice and counsel of fire protection professionals, that is your retained staff, as well as the volunteers that have served this district so well for so long.
We could bring that back, put it on next week's agenda for your approval if you'd prefer to handle it that way.
I think that'd be great, Mark. This is Commissioner Shimke. Just to, again, that way if anybody has any additional thoughts or feedback between now and then, obviously open to hearing it, but I think that would be a great next step.
Okay. Everybody in consensus that? Okay. Anything else for the board before we adjourn? Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Voting.
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Cosmo.
Commissioner Shimke votes aye.